Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 649 for July 9th, 2017. Coming up in a few minutes.
There was a college professor from Riverside, California that was visiting our distillery, and I was speaking with him, just, casual conversation. And he asked me, do you know what's going to happen here on August 21st, 2017? And we're talking, I'm not lying, about 6-7 years ago, maybe 8, shortly after we opened. And I said, actually, I think I've heard something about that. Is it an Eclipse? And he said, yes. And he says, I'm going to be right here.
That professor won't be the only one descending on Pembroke, Kentucky, 6 weeks from now. MB Roland Distillery founders Paul and Mary Beth Tomaszewski are expecting several thousand people to watch the upcoming total solar eclipse in the fields around their distillery. Paul Tomaszewski joins us later on WhiskyCast In-Depth to discuss the hoopla surrounding the eclipse and how stargazers can still get some space at the distillery on August 21st. I'll also have the calendar of events, this week's Your Voice, and the What I'm Tasting This Week department, including a whiskey dedicated to the eclipse. That's all coming up on this week's WhiskyCast.
You don't need a special occasion to celebrate with something truly unique. But a personally engraved bottle of Johnnie Walker Blue Label can make any occasion special. Support for WhiskyCast comes from Johnnie Walker. Visit johnniewalker.com to find out more about engraving options near you.
WhiskyCast, brought to you by Redbreast, the definitive single pot still Irish whiskey. Those in the know Redbreast.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by Highland Park. World leaders are meeting in Hamburg, Germany at the G20 summit this weekend, and trade is one of the key topics of discussion and debate. European Union leaders are threatening to retaliate if U.S. President Donald Trump follows through on a plan to slap punitive tariffs on imported steel, and U.S. whiskey makers have reason to be concerned. According to Friday's Financial Times, the European Union is prepared to impose its own sanctions on bourbon and other American-made whiskeys, along with orange juice and dairy products, if the Trump administration goes ahead with that steel tariff. EU member nations are the second largest global exporter of steel behind China, and the EU sent more than 3 million tons of steel to the U.S. last year. Since the U.S. is not a steel exporter, the Europeans want to go after politically sensitive U.S. exports, and of course, going after bourbon could cause some tension for the administration, with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky. Kentucky Distillers Association President Eric Gregory has been trying to track down his state's members of Congress as the 4th of July recess winds down to remind them just how much bourbon exports mean to their voters.
We worked hard over the past 10 years at least, if not longer, to enact free trade agreements and remove barriers and discriminatory tariffs and other policies that really have put bourbon for years at a competitive disadvantage. And Mark, as you know, a lot of our companies now, especially our heritage members, have invested in the European markets through Scotch brands and other brands, just as others have invested here. So the trade agreements going back and forth have been very important, and it's been a big growth sector for our market. And I think it's a lot due to a lot of the expansion you're seeing right now.
According to the Distilled Spirits Council, bourbon alone was responsible for 1/5 of the $654 million in U.S. spirits exports to Europe last year, and 4 EU member nations rank among the top 10 export markets for U.S. spirits. More political news now. 2 weeks ago, we reported on the Trump administration's proposed budget cuts for the Treasury Department's Tax and Trade Bureau. The TTB is the lead regulatory agency for the spirits industry, and that proposed budget also eliminated an extra $5 million in supplemental funding that had been in place for the last 2 years to speed up approvals for new labels and formulas. Now, the House Appropriations Committee has sent next year's Treasury budget to the full House for a vote. that could come as early as this week. That budget keeps the TTB's funding at current levels, along with the extra $5 million in supplemental funding. While we're talking about the TTB, there's another three-letter abbreviation that whiskey makers focus a lot of attention on. It's DSP. That stands for Distilled Spirits Plant, and it's the basic federal license issued by the TTB that's required before one can legally operate a still and make whiskey. While most Americans took this past Monday off and turned the 4th of July holiday into a 4-day weekend, someone at the TTB was working and issued the DSP for Chip Tate's Tate & Company Distillery in Waco, Texas. Of course, Chip was the founder of Balcones Distilling in Waco, but left after a lengthy dispute with his majority investors at the end of 2014. After our recent stories on Balcones following my visit to Waco last month, we had a number of questions from listeners about the status of Chip Tate's new distillery. Monday's issuance of his license clears away one of the hurdles that he's faced in getting the distillery up and running. Now that you got the DSP, where do you stand in terms of getting up and producing? Because I kind of thought we were going to be at this stage a year or so ago from what we had originally talked about.
Hey, give me a hard time here, huh?
No, because I remember you were talking about getting
distillery.
started as soon as you were talking
you're
about
right.
getting started in March of last year as soon as your non-compete ended.
Yeah. I mean, that was always the hope. The simple answer is that a distillery of this size and the plan, has gotten a little bigger, not in terms of capacity, but additional storage buildings and just all the ancillary stuff that comes along with building a distillery. That's kind of what's taken the time.
Now that you've got the DSP, what's left to go?
Well, we've got some still installations to go, a little bit of additional fabrication on that. We've got essentially the foundations to pour for the storage building and, the erection of a steel building and that kind of thing, which is non-trivial, but not the sort of core engineering stuff for the distillery. That's in good shape, but putting it all together takes some doing as well.
You can listen to my entire interview with Chip Tate in the news section at WhiskyCast.com. He's hoping to have construction completed in time to begin distilling early in 2018. Meanwhile, the bulldozers will soon be firing up at Bunnahabhain Distillery on Islay. Distell announced plans this week for the first major construction project at the distillery since the 1960s. The project is budgeted at £11 million, a little more than $14 million, and will take 3 years to complete. Distell Malt's brand manager Derek Scott walked me through some of the changes coming to the distillery.
Quite a lot of the buildings are no longer either fit for purpose or being used. And some of them, are sort of relics from the 1960s, not terribly well built. And so what we would like to do is clear up some of our properties. So we're demolishing some of the housing that is at the back of the site that's no longer used and really couldn't be used. We are also demolishing and rebuilding some of our warehousing because it's got to a state where it's no longer really sort of terribly functional. So the site will have roughly the same amount of cask storage. It's just we need to improve some of the warehousing. And as part of that, we're also tidying up the sort of front fascia of the distillery because, there's all sorts of different sizes of warehouses and some are at the back of the site and some are at the front. So all of our warehousing will be along the front at the coast and essentially sort of making it more fit for purpose. In line with that, we also need to upgrade our road in and out of the site and some of the services, in terms of that come onto the site. So that also has to be improved. Andrew, our distillery manager, will be getting a brand new house in the best location on the site. I have to say I'm a little bit jealous, but he's in need of it. The house he's in just now isn't up to scratch, so we're building him a brand new house. We're also going to upgrade quite a lot of the cottages we have on site. So we have about 8 cottages that are available for sort of guests and things. They need a good tidy up and improvements, so we're investing in all of those, some of which we will be letting out as holiday lets, others we use for sort of internal purposes. Obviously, when people go over to the distillery, it's more cost effective to put them up in our own housing.
There are also plans to turn one of the existing warehouses into a new visitors center with windows overlooking Bunnahabhain Bay and the Strait of Jura, and the distillery's pier will also be upgraded with new moorings for sailors who want to visit Bunnahabhain by boat. The announcement comes as Bunnahabhain unveiled its oldest ever bottling this week in London. It's a 46-year-old single malt matured in a second fill sherry butt, and I'm going to let Derek Scott pronounce its name.
It's called Eclipse, which means waves of the god Lord Lear, who is an ancient Gallic mythology, was the god of the seas. The sort of mythology behind it, he would throw enormous waves at the coastline, and we quite like that because, as you know, Bunnahabhain is right on the coast, and when we get a northerly gale coming in, the seas come right up against the distillery walls. And as Andrew was pointing out at an event we were doing in London earlier this week, sometimes when the seas are really big, he finds seaweed thrown against his office window, and he's on the first floor. So he's one story up, and he's getting all this sea coming against it. So we live by the sea, and the sea influences our whiskey.
Only 198 bottles will be available worldwide, with a recommended price of $7,000 each. There are two more new expressions as well, a 1980 Canasta sherry cask finish that will sell for around $2,335, and a 2003 Pedro Jimenez sherry cask finish that will carry a price tag of $110 a bottle. A new 13-year-old brandy cask finish single malt from Bunnahabhain will be out later this year. The Dalmore is releasing a new collection of single malts finished in port casks. Richard Patterson used tawny port pipes from W&J Graham's in Portugal to finish malts from 1996, 1998, and 2001. They're available at prices ranging from £150 or $195 a bottle for the 2001 vintage to £450, $580 for the 1996 edition. Canadian Club teased us late this week with a tweeted photo of its newest whiskey coming out later this year. Actually, it's the oldest Canadian Club yet, a 40-year-old whiskey bottled at 45% ABV. No word yet on just when it will be released, but given that the teaser photo included both English and French on the label, it's fair to assume that it will be available in Canada as well as the U.S. and other markets. Meanwhile, Speyside's Glen Murray Distillery has tapped into some of its oldest casks for a new whiskey to mark its 120th anniversary. Distillery manager Graham Cool picked 5 vintages dating as far back as 1978 for Mastery. Mastery includes casks laid down by Graham's predecessors, Robert Brown and Ed Dodson. 1,000 numbered decanters will be available worldwide at a recommended price of £800, about $1,030 each. Now, what happens when you turn a dozen bartenders loose in a whiskey blending lab? In Auchentoshan's case, you get the bartender's malt. The 12 bartenders were regional winners of the distillery's New Malt Order competition last year and were invited to Beam Suntory's blending lab in Glasgow to create their own Auchentoshan blends. Those blends were combined to create the bartender's malt. Unfortunately, you probably won't be able to find it at retailers. It's being produced specifically for the on-trade market at bars and restaurants. It seems like hardly a week goes by when we don't have something new from Douglas Lang & Company, but this week it's Douglas Lang's corporate cousin with news. Douglas McGibbon & Company was founded by Fred Douglas Lang in 1947, a year before he started Douglas Lang & Company, and it's also run by Fred Douglas Lang's son, Fred Lang, and his daughter, Cara. They are relaunching McGibbon's Clondenny range of single-cask Scotch whiskies with new packaging and 5 new expressions, single malts from Auchentoshan, Glengoyne, Craigellachie, and Bowmore, and a 28-year-old single grain from Port Dundas. All 5 will be available worldwide. No word on pricing. And finally, we introduced you to Dr. Martin Tangney of Edinburgh's Napier University way back in episode 275 of WhiskyCast, almost 7 years ago. He's been working for years now on a method for turning distillery waste into biofuel, and this week, his biobutanol fuel made from Tullibardine Distillery's draft and pot ale was used in a car for the first time. It was a success, with a BBC Scotland reporter driving the car and reporting no difference between it and cars using conventional fuels. Tangney's Celtic Renewables firm has Scottish government funding for a commercial-scale demonstration plant that will be up and running in 2019. The advantage that his biobutanol fuel offers is that, unlike other biofuels, it can be used in cars without having to modify the engine. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com. The news is brought to you by Highland Park, the Orkney single malt with Viking soul, and a brand new website. Check it out today at HighlandParkWhiskey.com.
Redbreast fans have always cherished our whiskey's sherry notes, so we set out to embellish that character. Introducing the Redbreast Listowel edition, a quintessential single pot still Irish whiskey finished in first fill Oloroso sherry casks from Spain's prestigious Bodegas Listowel. Carrying Redbreast's trademark pot still spices and dark dried fruit notes, the Listowel edition is graced with an enduring sherry finish that would be better described as a final act. Discover the newest branch on the Redbreast family tree.
Redbreast Listowel is now the latest award-winning member of the Redbreast family. It is Whisky Advocate's 2016 Irish Whisky of the Year. Try a bottle for yourself.
Before we get to this week's Your Voice, I'd like to ask for your help. Our audience is growing rapidly, and we are very pleased to welcome all of our new listeners. But there are still millions of whiskey lovers around the world who have never heard of WhiskyCast. Here's how you can help. Tell your friends about the show, and better yet, listen to an episode with them over a dram or two. Second, you can leave a review for WhiskyCast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app or directory. We have found that reviews and ratings do make a difference in search results, so when someone is searching for whiskey podcasts, the more recent reviews and ratings we have, the higher we show up in the results. And on that note, if you're a fan of WhiskyCast, and I hope you are, please visit podcastawards.com this week. Nominations are open for this year's Podcast Awards until July 31st, and we need to be among the top 10 podcasts receiving nominations to move on to the final judging. We're up for awards in both the Arts category and the overall People's Choice category. Just click the Nominations Are Now Open link at podcastawards.com and register to enter your nominations. You can also sign up to be one of the randomly selected public voters that will help determine the overall winners next month. Once again, the address is podcastawards.com, and there's a link on our homepage at whiskycast.com. We really appreciate all of your support. Let's open up the inbox now for this week's Your Voice, brought to you by Lot 40. We had a lot of response to last week's interview with Scott Davidson of Glencairn Crystal, and it even sparked a contest. At Antamaria on Twitter started it off by posting a photo of 6 Glencairns and the comment, "Thanks for today's great episode." That gave us the idea to ask folks on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to share photos of their Glencairns with us and pick one at random to receive a WhiskyCast Glencairn glass to add to their collection. Lots of responses came in. Kurt Robinson, at All Things Whiskey on Twitter, lined up his 902 Glencairns on 3 tables and stacks of Glencairn boxes for a photo. Now, Ward Council, at Whiskey with Ward on Twitter, came close to matching that number. His collection almost filled an entire dining room table, including a massive oversized Glencairn that could probably hold an entire bottle of whiskey, and a few of the rare Glencairn Blue Glass Capitas. Ward also gets extra credit for sincerity in the Linus Van Pelt Most Sincere Pumpkin Patch category, as he described it. Nice Charlie Brown Halloween reference there. And he also posted his photo on both Twitter and our Facebook page. Ward even added this comment, Very fine folks at Glencairn Glass. They make me feel like even my tiny individualized orders are important to them. Reb Mordecai emailed us from Israel with a simple photo of 2 Glencairns, but their rarity is what makes those glasses unique. They're from Israel's Milk and Honey Distillery. Peter Grasso of the Monmouth Whiskey Club in New Jersey tweeted 2 photos, one of the club's stacks of glasses in their totes ready for the next club meeting, and one of his own personal collection, noting that his WhiskyCast glass is up front. His club hosted me for a tasting last year. Peter also had this response to Kurt Robinson's photo. Most impressive. Beats my 297 glasses. I bought my first in August 2015. Need a Glencairn emoji. I'll second that. We really do need a Glencairn emoji. The whiskey glass emoji that's available now is a rocks glass with ice in it, for crying out loud. David Taylor in Tasmania tweeted a photo of his Glencairns from several Australian distilleries. Chris Walker posted a nice collage of photos from the W Bar in Glendale, Arizona, on our Facebook page, too. It's hard to pick a winner from so many entries, but we picked one at random. The winner is kind of appropriate, since at Anto Maria was the idea for it in the first place, but he's the winner of a WhiskyCast Glencairn glass. Congratulations. We'll be in touch to get your address. After we posted our story about the federal license for Chip Tate's new Tate & Company distillery this week, John Tigtorn, at jtigtorn on Twitter, tweeted a screenshot of the latest TTB list of distillery permits that's available on the Bureau's website. He highlighted TXS 20108 and asked, "Are you sure? The TTB seems to disagree." Now, the reason he asked is because our story on the website included a screenshot of Chip Tate's tweet from July 4th announcing the permit with that same number. The TTB's public list of permits has that number assigned to Avanac Distillery, LLC in Houston, but that list is only updated once a week. And in this case, the last update was on Sunday, July 2nd. We followed up by asking both Chip Tate and the TTB for an explanation. While we never heard back from the TTB, Chip tweeted a photo of his actual DSP, which is permit number TXS 20109, but registry number DSP TX 20108, issued on July 3rd. One number's difference there, and Chip explained that the DSP number is the registry number, but the permit number is a bit different, and most distillers refer to their DSP number because it's the one that appears on product labels. No explanation why the numbers are slightly different, but John, thank you for giving us a chance to dig a little deeper into the story, and thanks to Chip for responding so quickly and transparently with an answer. Our story this week at WhiskyCast.com on Bunnahabhain's construction project also generated some comments. Derek Scott mentioned a few minutes ago that one of the first things they'll be doing is some work on the road leading to the distillery. If you've ever been there, you know it's a single-lane road that has a lot of sheep and big trucks going to and from the distillery. Daniel Mathers posted this on our Facebook page, and I'm quoting now, "That bloody road, you can barely call it a road. It's more like a track. Good investment." Jason LeBlanc responded, "That road, with road in quotation marks, was an enjoyable part of the distillery experience." And there are a lot of people hoping the distillery experience at Bunnahabhain isn't affected by the construction. Robert Theakston tweeted, "Hopefully they're smart about this, very considered and not rushing or following design trends." And at Birmingham on Twitter sent this, "Could be a shame if not done sensitively. I love it as it is." Gordon Homer tweeted, "Would be great if they'd done the cottages up for rental again. Many happy memories staying there, but somehow I doubt it." But as Derek Scott said in our interview, they do plan to make some of the renovated cottages available for holiday rentals. By the way, you can listen to the entire interview with Derek and see an artist's rendering of what the distillery will look like after the renovation in the news section at WhiskyCast.com. If you have anything you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, you can always post it on the Your Voice page at WhiskyCast.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr at WhiskyCast. And we've also added a voicemail box on Skype where you can leave voicemail messages. Just search for WhiskyCast in the Skype directory. And if you don't have Skype, well, you can record a voice memo on your phone and email it to us. Our address is comments@whiskycast.com. This week's Your Voice is brought to you by Lot 40, Canada's award-winning 100% pot still rye whiskey. Lot 40, unapologetically Canadian. Please drink responsibly. Time now for the WhiskyCast calendar of events. Detroit's Metro Times has its annual Pig and Whiskey Festival this coming weekend in the suburb of Ferndale, Michigan. Westport Whiskey and Wine in Louisville, Kentucky has a Four Roses tasting with Al Young and his 50th anniversary limited edition bourbon coming up on July 18th. The Whiskey Exchange in London has an evening with Teeling Whiskey on the 19th. The West Coast Whiskey Phage is July 22nd in Oban, Scotland. Hard to Find Whiskey in Birmingham, England has a tasting of Tomatin and Kubakan whiskies July 28th. Whiskey Freedom 2017 is on July 29th in Perth, Australia, and Whiskey Live Adelaide is August 4th and 5th. Right now we have 140 different events on the searchable calendar at whiskycast.com. If you have a festival or a tasting coming up, just use the contact form on our website and let us know about it.
You don't need a special occasion to open a bottle of Johnnie Walker Blue Label. But when you have a special occasion, why not celebrate with a specially engraved bottle of Johnnie Walker Blue Label? Here's how one whiskey lover celebrated his team's recent success. He arranged to have 108 specially engraved bottles of Johnnie Walker Blue Label made for his co-workers. You might say he hit a home run. Just like a perfectly executed double play, Johnnie Walker Blue Label is smooth and well-rounded, and unlike a trophy, never needs polishing. Support for WhiskyCast comes from Johnnie Walker. Visit johnnywalker.com to find out more about engraving options near you.
Johnnie Walker Blue Label Blended Scotch Whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume. Imported by Diageo North America, Norwalk, Connecticut. Please drink responsibly.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Lagavulin. Astronomers have had August 21st marked on their calendars for years now. It's possible to calculate exactly when the moon's orbit will carry it between the sun and the Earth and create a total solar eclipse. Total eclipses aren't rare, but one that stretches across North America in the middle of the day certainly is. While most of North America will get a partial eclipse that day, the narrow band stretching from Oregon to South Carolina will get a brief total eclipse as the moon blocks out the sun. But Christian County, Kentucky will be the best place on Earth to watch the eclipse. Astronomers have pinpointed the area around Hopkinsville as the peak eclipse zone, and fortunately for us, there just happens to be a whiskey distillery in the area. Even better, Paul and Mary Beth Tomaszewski's M.B. Roland Distillery just happens to have a lot of wide-open fields. Paul told me this week that they've been preparing for the eclipse for years now.
The community has really gotten behind the effort with us being, part of that process of trying to drum up the fact that this is a unique opportunity for our area. And in our situation, I don't want to say it's simple. It's simpler than some folks because we do have regular summer events where we have well over 1,000 people at a time. So for us to do something for this eclipse, it's somewhat business as usual. It's just a little bit, larger of a crowd that we're going to be accustomed to, but the process is going to be all the same, as far as the logistics associated with it. So for us, it's just been, what can we do as we approach the actual dates to make sure that we have what we need, that we've done everything we can to prepare. But the day of, I think, is going to go pretty smoothly, relatively speaking. I'm not saying that there won't be a huge amount of people in lines to wait in, but generally speaking, this is something that we're accustomed to.
What did you think when you first found out that this total solar eclipse was going to pass right over your distillery in Pembroke, Kentucky?
It was actually about 7 or 8 years ago, and there was a college professor from Riverside, California, that was visiting our distillery, and I was speaking with him, just, casual conversation. And he asked me, "Do you know what's going to happen here on August 21st, 2017? And we're talking, I'm not lying, about 6, 7 years ago, maybe 8, shortly after we opened. And I said, "Actually, I think I've heard something about that. Is it an Eclipse?" And he said, "Yes." And he says, "I'm going to be right here," because he had family in the area, and he was already thinking about it, just from the standpoint of the unique opportunity. And from that point on, it was one of those things where we've got someone from California 7, 8 years, before the actual event that's thinking about this. This is something that is going to be a big deal. And everything as far as projections and thoughts for people coming to this area and just general feedback for the area. When I say the area, I mean Christian County, Kentucky, which for those that aren't familiar with us, we're in Western Kentucky. We're 2 hours plus from Louisville and Lexington and Central Kentucky. We're sort of, in a unique area when it comes to our geographic location. So it's not, your typical tourism area for Kentucky. But as far as the actual Eclipse goes, when we heard about it, we said, this is something we're going to have to really keep an eye on. And also it was about speaking with other people in our community and really getting the word out, getting the awareness out in regards to what the community can do to prepare for this, because it's coming. This isn't something that you plan for and it happens. It's happening whether you plan for it or not. So that was really the biggest focal point for us, our community, and just looking at the Eclipse several years ago.
And let's put this in perspective. A lot of people across North America are going to see this eclipse because it's going from Oregon, essentially the Portland area, all the way down southeast, down to around Charleston, South Carolina. But you guys are pretty much at ground zero for the most of the eclipse, right?
What it's called is the point of greatest eclipse. And I am not an astronomer,
nor am I,
or a NASA, person or anything like that. But over the years, we've spoken to a lot of people, had a lot of people come and speak in our community. And the way I understand it is the longest duration of the eclipse is, generally speaking, in this area, meaning, okay, so you can view it for 2 minutes and 39, 40 seconds, whatever it's going to be, versus, let's say in Portland, it might be for a minute or a minute 20 or something like that. So they get to view the same eclipse. The difference is, in addition to the time, is the actual, I guess, spectacular corona and all this fun stuff that you get to see with the eclipse is going to look its best here in Christian County, Kentucky. And I'll back up real quick and explain that for those that don't know this, and I'm going to say most people don't, you cannot view a total solar eclipse with your naked eye, or rather you can't watch. If you were to Google it and look at videos or pictures, it's not going to look as amazing as it looks with your naked eye. That is, once the actual moon has covered up the sun and you don't have to worry about burning out your eyeballs, from the sun. But the view that you see of the actual valleys and peaks and valleys of the moon, all the geographic things that you're going to see, and the rings that come out from the actual eclipse itself are best viewed here. But also it's the fact that unless you actually see it in person, supposedly these are people that are experts in this field. They've said that it does not compare if you try to look at videos or pictures.
And as far as I know, you guys may be, with a few exceptions, I don't think there's any other distillery in Kentucky that's along this really serious route, is there?
Actually, there's one other one, Casey Jones Distillery.
Okay.
And they are just north of us.
Oh, that's right. I'd forgotten about Casey Jones, yeah.
And they're having an equal amount of fanfare for this event as we are. And they're actually a little bit closer. It's not going to matter to the naked eye for the most part, or completely, I guess. I think they have a half second more of total duration of the eclipse, something like that. But, Christian County, Kentucky, generally speaking, highlighting all the things that, as far as the length of time, but also just the general beauty and what you're going to see is you can't beat.
One advantage that you have that they don't have is that you've got this great big field where people can camp out for the weekend leading up to the eclipse, right?
Yeah, we're flat and we have open fields. I mean, there's a slight little bit of rolling to our acreage here, but it's a giant, massive cornfield where we are. We've got some open acreage for campsites and about 7 acres of parking space. And then we also have another, let's call it 6-7 acres of viewing area where people can actually stand and view. So during the day of the eclipse, what we're doing, and we just went live with this on our website, is we're selling day passes, and people can get an individual pass where they pay $5. They'll get a set of the viewing glasses, the eclipse viewing glasses that you need to view the eclipse, because in order to properly view the eclipse, you have to cover up your eyes with some type of blacking out shade. That basically think of 3D glasses, but times 5 as far as how heavy they are in your eyes for the blacking out the sun. Otherwise, you can injure your eyes, obviously, by looking directly at the sun. So it is important for a total solar eclipse. So you get the day pass, you get the glasses, and during the day, we'll have food vendors on site. We'll have, of course, tours and tastings throughout the day. We'll have adult beverages. We'll have also music playing during the day, not during the eclipse, because we're going to shut things down to actually enjoy the eclipse for a few minutes there when it hits point of greatest eclipse. And that's going to be at approximately 1:20 in the afternoon Central Time on that Monday, which is August the 21st. So we're talking just a little over a month now.
How much demand have you already had for your campsites, and where are people coming from for this?
Our campsites we're getting a lot of traction now that we're talking a few days out, and we're doing our campsites a little bit differently than some of the other places in the area where we have a big event that weekend that we kicked off last year called the Kentucky Bourbon Masherie, where we're going to host another 15 Kentucky distilleries on the property, and they're going to come and you'll be able to sample their product during that event, which is going to be on August the 18th and 19th. And so for the people that want to camp out, they get to take part in that. We have a special dinner that Saturday night. They'll get tickets for merchandise, packaging, etc. And they get their choice of a 20 by 30 campsite or a larger site for motor coaches or RVs. We do not have electricity hookup, and we have portable toilets, but we don't have any type of, regular running water restrooms because the amount of people we're talking about here.
And no hookups for water for RVs too, right?
No hookups for water. We do have water if people want to fill up some type of, tanks or anything like that. But we don't have water for people to hook up. So they need to be self-sustaining if they're going to come on our property. Generators are acceptable as long as they adhere to a few rules that we'll have. We'll have on-site security with Christian County Sheriff's deputies throughout the entire weekend and the eclipse. So it'll be a nice, safe environment in regards to that. And it's going to be a nice, comfortable atmosphere. It's going to be hot, obviously, so we'll do everything we can to have water and like a humidification station and things like that. But, it is August and we are in essentially the South here in southwestern Kentucky. So it's going to be your typical summer weather. But as far as the interest from people outside of the country, we've got people that are camping here from California, from Quebec, Canada, from New York, and many other places, that all in between there. The clientele for eclipses, and specifically this eclipse, is a largely international group of people, both from Europe and Asia. These are people that have, access to private planes and do this regularly, have been to anywhere from, 5 to 25 eclipses in some cases, and they go all over the world. They're known as quote unquote eclipse chasers, because that's what they do, is chase the eclipses and get and it's supposedly a euphoric high. I've never seen one yet, so I'm very interested to see if I get the same feeling that they described.
Now, I have to ask, are you going to release a special Eclipse edition bottling for the occasion?
We'll do something. Yeah, it'll be a special bottle, in all likelihood a special batch. So yes, we'll have a special bottle that you'll be able to purchase here on site, likely engraved with some neat looking, Eclipse paraphernalia on it.
That will, I'm sure, become a collector's item for Eclipse chasers and astronomers and whiskey lovers in general, right?
Right, and a lot better than a can of dark, because I'm sort of a little joke. When we first started getting into researching eclipses, there was a eclipse back in the 70s, and someone over on the West Coast, as a merchandise item for the eclipse, literally sold an empty can with a label that said a can of dark because of the eclipse, making things dark overnight. But that yeah, I know, isn't that amazing? So they'll get an actual bottle of bourbon if they purchase something from us. But as far as the event goes, it's really interesting because during that period of time when things get dark in the middle of the day, it causes all the bugs and animals to get confused. And so it'll literally seem like night for those 2 minutes. And that's part of the really amazing process, is you hear all these crickets chirping and birds start nesting and things like that happen at nighttime.
What do you think it's going to be like in your cornfield, in your fields on August 21st around 1:20 p.m.? What do you think it's going to be like? You talked about this euphoric high some people get from an eclipse, and I can only imagine what it's going to be like. What do you think it's going to be like?
We are going to do our best for people coming to hand out information as people are coming on the property of certain etiquette associated with eclipses to try to get everyone to follow. That being said, we are in the day and age of cell phones. So the biggest thing is going to be to get people to make sure their flashes aren't on and their cell phone light, their cell phones are turned off to some degree. I know that's going to be a tall order, but we're going to do our best, because the idea with the eclipse is, again, you cannot take pictures or video to replicate what you're going to see with your naked eye. And every eclipse expert that we have spoken to says, put your stuff down. If you've got something set up appropriately from a scientific standpoint to view it or to record it, that's one thing. But if you're just taking a casual, selfie video or something like that, put your phone down, turn it off, and enjoy the 2.5 minutes. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You're never going to see it again. If you take a video, it's not going to look the same as when you look at it with your naked eye. So that's what we're going to try to instill in people. We are expecting between 5,000 and 8,000 people to be out here throughout the course of the day. That doesn't mean they'll all be here during the actual eclipse viewing, because there are other viewing sites all over our county and area, which is great because that actually makes things a little simpler for everybody. But if we have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people during the viewing of the eclipse, we're going to make announcements. We're going to have handouts when they come in. We're going to do our very best to try to make sure that those certain behaviors are adhered to, so that everyone can enjoy the actual once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of viewing this eclipse.
In other words, you're going to ask people to actually observe the basic rules of etiquette and civility for once, and not just go completely nuts.
Well, that doesn't mean people aren't going to make noises, because I have watched several eclipse videos, and when the lights go out completely, people literally start screaming in amazement. So that is normal, and that is perfectly fine. But it's, again, the more light, we're getting back to the whole thing with cell phones and flashes and everything, we've already arranged with our utility company for all of our nearby street lights, because we are considered a designated viewing area for our county. We're going to have all of our street lights and things like that turned off None of that should come on, and it's going to be as dark as possible here at the distillery, and it's going to allow you to view that eclipse in its best form.
So are you guys going to have the stills running during the eclipse and then bottle that as this was distilled during the solar eclipse of August 21st, 2017?
We might be talking about that. It's definitely been something that we've joked about for years now, and it would almost seem wrong not to do that.
And let's put this in perspective. You mentioned earlier you guys are about a couple of hours southeast or southwest of Louisville, but you're also basically just about an hour, if I remember correctly, northwest of Nashville.
Yeah.
So if somebody's flying in for this, it would be easier to fly into Nashville, probably.
Correct. Yeah, we're just off of I-24, northwest of Nashville, Tennessee. Really, assuming that there's not any crazy traffic, we're only about 50 minutes from downtown Nashville. The airport's another 5 or 10 minutes away because it's out of town a little bit. But if you're flying in for this event, definitely Nashville, Tennessee is going to be your best bet, and we're a straight shot up the interstate from there.
And just to point out, campsites are kind of important because I remember being out there a couple of years ago, and if I remember correctly, the only hotel in the area is the Hampton Inn about a couple of miles down the road, and there's only one of those. And I imagine that's been booked for a few years. There's
several hotels, and some of them do have rooms available. There's some in Hopkinsville, Oak Grove, Kentucky, but also Clarksville, Tennessee's nearby. But The issue with hotels is more so that they're going to have a probably 4 or 5 night minimum, and it's going to be, like Kentucky Derby or Mardi Gras pricing is the simplest, nicest way to put it. So a lot of people...
That's very kind of you, Paul. That's very kind of you.
And being from Kentucky and originally from New Orleans, I understand both. But the big thing with this whole deal with the campsites is, being outside with the whole experience. You get to live where you're going to view it in some cases if you get a campsite here or at another viewing location. And, of course, it's going to be a little bit cheaper than if you were to go pay, probably a few $1,000s in hotel fees to stay at a nearby hotel. And we do have hotels very close by, just about 3 miles, 4 miles away in different directions. So, if you Google us and look up on a map hotels, there's several options. And I would recommend, if you are interested in getting hotels, because obviously it's nice to have that, all the amenities of having a hotel room, particularly when you're talking about August and air conditioning. I would call the hotel
and running water.
Correct. I would call the hotel directly. Do not go through an intermediary website. If you call the hotel directly, a lot of times they're going to have things available that you're not going to be able to find on the internet. So look up the hotels, call them, ask them about, shop around, see what kind of pricing opportunities there are out there. But I literally talked to one hotel owner a couple of weeks ago, and they still have rooms available. So there are opportunities out there for people that want that. And then I believe there's people doing Airbnb. So that's another option that people can look at. Unfortunately, my house is already taken up, so they won't be staying here. But as far as the actual distillery, we do have the campsites, of course.
You're going to let people camp out in the warehouses too, or something like that?
Not necessarily, but there might be a few little. Let's just put it this way: if you're a whiskey lover and you've ever had the interest in, hanging out at the distillery with the distillers, we may have some unique stuff planned for those that are camping out. Once I'm talking about the weekend, not the day of the eclipse, but we're talking the days leading up, those evenings, once we're closed and people are out of the way, we might have some fun stuff lined up. So we'll make it worth their while. They're going to have a good time. I promise you that.
Details on camping and day passes are available at MB Roland Distillery's website. And there's a link in our show notes for this episode at WhiskyCast.com. That's this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth, brought to you by Lagavulin, where patience has been awarded. Lagavulin 25 is Whiskey Advocate's Islay Single Malt of the Year. This 25-year-old whiskey matured exclusively in sherry casks is a recognition of the distillers that have crafted Lagavulin across the years. Learn more at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery, and there's already one special bottling out for the solar eclipse. So let's start off with Wyoming Whiskey's Eclipse Edition Bourbon. The path of the eclipse will cross Wyoming within a few miles of the distillery in Kirby as it crosses the country. So that's why they released this special batch blended by head distiller Sam Mead. By the way, while it has the standard label on the front, the back label has Eclipse where the batch number usually goes, and it's dated 8/21/17 for the date of the eclipse. It's bottled at 44% ABV, and the nose is aromatic with notes of caramel, fudge, soft spices, a hint of oak, toasted bread, and a nice touch of chocolate that opens up after a couple of minutes in the glass. The taste has linseed oil, good spicy white pepper and allspice, along with caramel, vanilla, chocolate, and fudge in the background. The finish is medium length with lingering chocolate, caramel, and linseed oil notes. I'm scoring Wyoming Whiskey's Eclipse Edition a 91. Next up, let's look at Westland Whiskey's 2017 batch of Garyana. As with last year's debut version, it's matured in Gary oak casks from the Pacific Northwest, but unlike last year's, it uses unpeated malt, which lets the natural phenolic character of the oak come through. The nose has a nice touch of barbecue smoke, along with creme brulee, allspice, a hint of cedar shavings, molasses, brown sugar, and vanilla. The taste is spicier than the nose would indicate, with notes of black pepper, cayenne, and a hint of allspice, balanced out by honey, barbecue smoke, brown sugar, and just a hint of citrus in the background. The finish is long, spicy, and intense. And please don't take this as an insult, but this batch of Garyana would be really fun to cook with. I could see making some pulled pork barbecue with it, or marinating some salmon in it for the grill. I'm scoring Westland's 2017 Garyana a 91. More tasting notes coming up in a minute, but first, this week's tasting notes are brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery, family-owned and operated since 1935. Heaven Hill remains fiercely independent and committed to the traditions and history of American whiskey, with an award-winning range including Evan Williams and Elijah Craig bourbons, and Rittenhouse and Pikesville ryes. Meet the whole family at heavenhilldistillery.com. Let's take a look now at an independent bottling from an undisclosed Islay distillery. The Lady of the Glen 2002 Secret Islay Sherry Cask is bottled by Hannah Whiskey Merchants and imported into the U.S. by Glass Revolution. The only hint we get about the source is that the distillery is on the eastern shore of Islay, which narrows it down just a bit. It's 14 years old and bottled at 56.2% ABV, and the nose has a light smokiness with notes of heather, smoked salmon, butterscotch, and caramel. The taste is peppery and pungent, though, with cinnamon and black peppercorns balanced by driftwood smoke. The spiciness fades slowly, leaving behind wisps of smoke and hints of heather, butterscotch, and caramel for a nice lingering finish. I'm scoring the Lady of the Glen 2002 Secret Islay 14-year-old Sherry Cask an 89. And let's finish up with High West's 2017 edition of Yippee-Ki-Yay. Its blend of straight rye whiskeys finished in a combination of vermouth and Syrah wine casks and bottled at 46% ABV. The nose has a good balance of cinnamon, clove, dried flowers, anise, and black cherries. The taste starts off spicy with cinnamon and a touch of orange peel, while berry cobbler develops in the background with touches of thyme, vanilla, and honey. The finish is long, sweet, and vibrant with lingering spices underneath notes of honey and berry cobbler. I'm scoring High West's 2017 Yippee-Ki-Yay release a 92. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Heaven Hill Distillery. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 1,900 different whiskeys at WhiskyCast.com. That's also where you'll find links for WhiskyCast HD and WhiskyCast virtual tastings episodes, the latest whiskey news, events, and much more, including a complete archive of past episodes. You can help other whiskey lovers discover WhiskyCast by leaving reviews at iTunes or your favorite podcast directory. And you can keep in touch with us on social media too. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr at WhiskyCast. And my email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
WhiskyCast. Brought to you by Redbreast, the definitive single pot still Irish whiskey. Those in the know Redbreast.
You don't need a special occasion to celebrate with something truly unique, but a personally engraved bottle of Johnnie Walker Blue Label can make any occasion special. Support for WhiskyCast comes from Johnnie Walker. Visit johnniewalker.com to find out more about engraving options near you.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2017, and comes to you each week from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.